all the honorable dignitaries and participants here at the virtual platform for the International E-Conference. The topic of today's International E-Conference is Enacting Holistic Approach, India's National Education Policy 2024. The college organizes a series of national and international webinars and conferences. The purpose behind organization of these conferences and webinars is to exchange knowledge among the intellectuals, students, researchers, teachers, and knowledge aspirants. The effort is going on very successfully and without any interruption, and it is because of the Honorable Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar sir. He is also the chairman of today's International E-Conference. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you, sir, as the chairperson of this International E-Conference. Today we have the honorable dignitary, keynote speaker and chief guest, Dr. Rishi from Prairie View A&M University, Texas, U.S.A. He is going to deliver a lecture on the topic Enacting Holistic Approach, India's National Education Policy. On behalf of the organizing committee and the college, I heartily welcome you, sir, as the keynote speaker. And now I request you, sir, to start your presentation on the topic. Please, sir.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for everyone. Thank you everyone for joining in today. I'm sharing my screen. So if you have any questions or comments while I'm presenting, please feel free to put your comments in the chat box. If not, we will definitely have a conversation about this after the presentation. So good evening. Good evening to all of you joining in from India. It's a good morning for me here in USA. I am joining in today to present about one of the strands of the updated new education policy by the Indian government. And while the new NEP started in 2020, every year it gets revised. So the 2024 revision has put a lot of emphasis on holistic development, and which happens to be one of my areas of because when I teach, also in my research projects, this is something that I do indulge in practice and research. So let's get started with this presentation. I wanted to share my contact information as well with you. So in case we are not able to complete our conversations today, or if you have anything you want to talk to me about further, please feel free to use the email address, and I would love to have this conversation with you. All right, so before we step into what the revisions are for the NEP this year, let's take a current look at the main pillars of the Indian education system, specifically in a post-secondary higher education context. And these features are not limited to higher education, because these same features are very visible in the kindergarten to 12th standard system as well. So, these features have been highlighted by the most recent meeting, the conference by the Department of Education. So one of the first things is rote memorization. Now, the way I have used both the different colors is academic excellence is one of the pros of the Indian education system, which is why it is highlighted in green. And when you look at and this is something that is discipline wide, whether it is STEM, engineering and science subjects, or math, commerce subjects, or social sciences subjects. Academic excellence is definitely something that India ranks much higher among other developing and developed countries. But then I have used the red color to highlight the pillars, which are areas that need to be worked on. So rote memorization has become one of the features of Indian education system, the products that we are, the processes that we are working with. And this is very visible in students who are in schools, as well as in colleges, as well as those who are preparing for exams, entrance exams. Rote memorization, if you look at the education policy of developed countries, is no longer a skill that is being worked upon. That is not some, because in today's world with increased data information systems approach into almost every subject that we do, uh, it is, for example, in my field, like accounting. At one point, we stopped working with formulas and informations directly, and we transformed everything into softwares. So at that point, you are not required to remember everything. What you are required is to be resourceful with the software itself. So, and this is something that we are seeing the ripple effect in a lot of subjects and a lot of disciplines where memorization is no longer a value skill, because there is a very good chance that a database, a free database, is going to replace that skill set for the student. The other feature that needs to be worked on is the heavy emphasis on standardized testing. This is true nationally for various disciplines on various academic levels. Standardized standardized testing is something that is the opposite of what holistic education intends to do. Through standardized testing, we aim at measuring the excellence or the capabilities of all students on the same level. Students come from different backgrounds, have different learning approaches, which means that their results and their skills and how they portray that will also be very different. To say that one standard test will be fair to judge everyone, and especially you have to consider students who are coming from different academic backgrounds. Someone who is coming from foreign languages background or social science or humanities background will have very different testing procedures and evaluation standards from that of someone who is coming from science, technology, engineering, or math background. So this is something that needs to be customized based on the academic levels of students, based on the different disciplines of students, and then there are further regional and smaller factors that need to be taken into consideration as well. The third area that needs to be worked on is the compartmentalized approach to subjects. Increasingly, especially this is more visible in higher education, it is becoming more and more inherent that interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach to student learning is becoming more popular, is showing better results, and is more of a factor towards student success than compartmentalized approach where every subject is treated as a different entity and there are no links between different subjects. Teachers, professors very rarely indulge in interdisciplinary assignments and research collaboration with other courses. And all of these are areas that have defined the Indian education for a long period of time, and which is why we see that in this year's revision, we are in the NEP, the government wants to focus more on holistic education, which again, if you go back to this green and red model, aims to continue the academic excellence part, but wants to revisit the other three features and make it more humanized, making education more humanized, basically. So if you look at the revisions, the three-dimensional focus, the most important values that this revision focuses on is critical thinking, holistic development, and global perspectives. So critical thinking is something that It's a skill which is very necessary, not just in the jobs that you are doing, but also in day-to-day life. It is essentially the skill of being able to analyze information objectively and then making decisions based on that. So when you apply critical thinking into your daily lives, you become more mindful of your biases. What biases do I hold? What judgments do I? What preconceived notions do I work with? So all of those, when you are very considerate and aware of those aspects, then you are able to make better decisions, and that is essentially what critical thinking is. How do we implement this on an educational level? Is one of the things is the role of the teacher or the professor of the new era, of the digital era, is to encourage and nurture curiosity and questioning ability in the students. This is not just a one-dimensional task, because this is something that students should have access to with their teachers, with their parents, with the community overall. A lot of times, questioning is equated to disrespect, and that is not the case. When a student, especially think about students who are early childhood in grades 1 to 4, 1 to 5, the cognitive development that is happening at that age is what allows kids and students to ask questions and be curious about you. So when students are questioning you back, it is not necessarily a question on your credibility. It is more so because they want to understand your thinking pattern, your thinking approach, and that is what helps them make decisions better. So, if you allow this, if you nurture this process of curiosity and the questioning ability, it only helps them build critical thinking skills. Then we have global perspectives. That is also one of the values in this NEP revision of this year. Global perspectives are absolutely needed. To say that this is something that you can do without is no longer possible, because the world is so interconnected on the smallest things like culture, food, music, sports, all the way to much bigger decisions like sharing resources, uh, migration of people, migration of resources, migration of issues, and also migration of solutions. So currently, we are seeing huge trends of nationalism all across the world. India has a Make in India campaign. The UK recently had Brexit. The USA recently had Make America Great Again. So all of these campaigns, while they are focused on bringing resources back and prioritizing one's own country first, we are still seeing that it is virtually impossible to live in a silo, because not there's not one country who has all the resources to facilitate human life and civilization. And similarly, there are when you run into issues, it is always beneficial to indulge in capacity building. Global perspectives bring various ways to solve problems. This also gives way to resource sharing, research collaboration. So there's a reason why a lot of these values are being incorporated into this year's revision of the NEP. Holistic development is the third one, and since that is that is the main topic of the presentation today, I will come back to that in just a second. So this was the three-dimensional focus, the values that the Department of Education and the Indian central government wants to focus on. If we look at how they are changing these values, converting these values into policies, the actual actionable items, then we see holistic learning is mentioned in there. So both their values and their processes both define holistic learning, holistic development, which shows how big of an emphasis this is. So, but then there are others as well: digital literacy and skill development. Digital literacy is something that is already shaping uh, every aspect of education, and also informal education, because we are not just learning from schools and universities, we are learning from our social institutions as well, our friends, our families, our organizations, our hobbies, interests, our places of worship. All of these are social institutions that also teach us growth and development. And digital literacy is something that affects almost all aspects of these institutions now. Uh, Increasingly, we are living in a world where we have very quick access to all sorts of information, and very rarely we are also running into issues. For example, what is the difference between information versus misinformation versus disinformation? And we see much larger effects of these differentiations. You can see how social media influencers use this. Uh, there is misinformation versus disinformation that affects the capitalism process of what you are buying, what you are consuming, who you are voting for. There are scams that come through your cell phones, through your emails. There are even something simple, something day to day that most of us have done is you would you considering YouTube or WhatsApp as a credible source of information for whether it's healthcare or whether it's legal advice. Right? So there's a lot of information, and there's a lot of good information everywhere. But how do we differentiate when we come across that one single piece that is not credible? So that is why digital literacy is becoming one of the not even the skills of the 21st century, but a demand. The other one is skill development. Skill development is something that I'm glad that the Indian government is making this a priority. And it is important that so any time a developing country focuses on skill development, they're not focusing on developing skills of the workforce to match the needs of today. That has already been done in the past. If it's not been done, then the better way to the prospect that they work with is always to match the needs of tomorrow, not today. Because if you're working on today's needs, then you're already late. So that is something that needs to be considered. How do we do proportionate learning from STEM fields and social sciences fields? Because everything comes together in order to build a society. STEM fields will give us the ways of applications and engineering, whereas social sciences will give us the way towards reasoning and logic through which we can make better decisions. And that balance is very key to maintain and achieve in order to have order and civilization in the society. For example, just one example, and I've talked about this in previous presentations as well, there is this sense of competitive education, of exam preparation in India that is very rarely seen in any other. It does not exist. Competitive exams do not exist in developing countries, but it is also very rarely seen in developing countries. But competitive education is one of the main themes of the Indian education system, whether it is in the field of public service like IAS, IPS, and a lot of these other careers, or whether it's STEM, IITs, whether it is management, IIMs. The status of certain universities and certain branding has fueled this competitive education as well. So a case study that I usually use is, for an example, uh, assume that there are 5,000 seats of a particular exam, but then we have almost 5 lakh students competing for that. The society itself nurtures an environment where working hard is celebrated. We praise them, we encourage them to continue with that. But what happens if you look at it objectively? Once the results are out, we as a society have prepared because there are only 5,000 seats. Out of the 5 lakh students, 5,000 of them will get those seats, will get those jobs, and that is wonderful for the society. But in this process, we have also created 4 lakh 95 unskilled students. Because there are not enough seats, they won't be able to convert whatever they learned through that process into application. So now they have to look elsewhere and move on to their second choices, third choices, and fourth choices. So that is a lot of population getting ready for the workforce, which is now unskilled or has to settle down with different skills. So skill development, the balance is very necessary to maintain and achieve. And again, the third one being holistic learning. So I'm coming to a holistic learning now, the holistic approach, what it is. But this was just to show you that how important it is that it is being mentioned in both policy changes as well as values. So holistic approach essentially means that when you, if you're teaching a student and it is an accounting class that the student is enrolled in, then after that, if the student is going to go to another, maybe a social science class, and the third period could be something else, and so on and so forth. Every semester looks different. But every semester, as one teacher or one professor, your goal is to make sure that they learn accounting. If there's an exam, they pass the exam and they move on to the next step. But what is happening is we are looking at every step as an individual step, as a compartmentalized step. If we look at the entire student journey, whether it is in schools or in colleges, and then even beyond that, if we humanize the student, that the person, the individual being a student is just one aspect of their life. There are so many other aspects that are going on. So if we start focusing on the overall development of a student, that is what a holistic approach is. Instead of giving compartmentalized and silo skills, if we move on to preparing overall citizens that we want to participate in the civic world, that is what a holistic approach does, and that is how it's possible to get it done through a holistic approach. So holistic approach is divided, can be defined into various categories. If all three of them are working together in order to develop someone holistically. Cognitive development, it's something that is a field of study in neuroscience and psychology. It focuses on an individual's development in terms of how they process information, how can they conceptualize their resources, and how are their perception skills, uh, how are their language learning skills, and so many other aspects of the developed adult brain and cognitive psychology. This essentially means the development of the ability to think and reason, to make critical thinking skills into action, and be able to make decisions to better yourself. Then we also have emotional development. Increasingly, social science research is putting out a lot of good things for us to learn about emotional development and how important that is for a student. Emotional development is marked by a gradually increasing ability to perceive, assess, and manage emotions. But this is so much more complex than that. It is a biological process which is driven by physical and cognitive changes and heavily influenced by the context and the environment. And this is very different for how it would look like for an adolescent young student in the school versus a young adult who is in college. Because your performance in school, your performance at work, your performance in your relationships, all of these influence your emotional development. But then, if we look at the student just as a student, then we would only be able to highlight that one part. So we will never be able to get a complete picture of what's going on. The process of emotional development gives young adults the opportunity to build skills, discover unique qualities in them, and develop strengths for optimal health. There's a lot of issues that can be managed by these issues regarding self-esteem. So a lot of times you ask the students a question in the class, and there are students who would not raise their hands just for fear of ridicule. What if I have the wrong answer? And that happens more often than not. But as the teacher, you have to think about what if that is the right answer, and what if we as a society missed out on that right answer, correct answer, or a different answer. So self-esteem in students is something that needs to be worked upon. Also, identity formation. We can value the individual as a whole, with all of their goods and bads and everything, and not just if they are good in accounts or if they are good in history, just one aspect of it. Uh, yes, you could have someone who is amazingly skilled at any kind of statistics, but they are not skilled at teamwork at all. When we focus on both the goods and the bads, and we take both of them as the students develop, students are able to make better decisions about what will work for them and what will not work for them. Right? It makes way for what future paths and careers and roles they want to take. The third thing being stress. Stress is something that affects all of us on pretty much every level on a day-to-day basis. uh, it is important to consider the person as a whole, as a complete individual, in order to see what are the stressors in someone's life, because a stress related to your relationships will also affect your academic life, your job performance, your mental health, and you lose efficiency. And there are a lot of formulas out there that show that how much the society misses out on efficiency if you even consider the smallest stressors that exist in 8 billion of us. The third one is societal development. Societal development happens through holistic approach. This necessitates a process in which a society increases its various capital stocks along social, economic, and environmental capitals. The idea of social development has often been connected with the idea of progress and the development of people and its societies. So that is to simply say that a society does not develop just by good doctors and good lawyers and just by students who are getting the first rank. A society builds and exists on every single student and every single role, because as much as we need good doctors and good lawyers, we also need good plumbing systems. We also need excellent bridges in our society. And it's not always need based. We also want music. We also want good food. We want good artists. We also want a healthy environment. We also need good manners. So if we start ranking skills based on a hierarchy, then we start valuing them as well accordingly. So we value the skills that everybody wants to study medical and law, and then those skills get valued differently than somebody who wants to maybe drop out of college and start a business somewhere. But at the end, you need all of these on the same spectrum to have a developed society. And the thing with an education revamping policy like this, it shows that the focus is returning back to investing first, and only then you will get it back. Right? One of the things mentioned in the education policy changes is actionable items is teacher preparation. Teacher preparation is something, a formal pipeline of teacher preparation is always has been lacking in Indian education system. And it is very visible to see in our society as well, because everyone always wants their children to have the best teachers, but nobody wants their children to become the best teachers. Right? So education and skills are mostly linked with social status. But if you look at progressive societies, developed countries, social status is not linked to skill or education. In some certain scenarios, it always is, but for the most part, progressive societies are not built and run that way. So this after this, overview of what it is, let's talk about what it is that is needed. Yes, the government is working towards policy change, but how does it work? There are countless examples of projects and programs that the government works on, but then on the lower end, the impact is not as intended. So before this policy change happens, I think it's more important to have a perspective change, because that will facilitate the policy change process much easily and will allow you to see the impact. So some of the common myths, and I call these myth because there is no scientific proof of science does not support, any kind of research does not support how it works and what the good benefits or the bad results are. So the first one, uh, this was something that was debunked in my generation itself. When I was in school, said, do not rely on calculators. You will fail unless you remember the formulas and you do the math yourself. That is no longer the case anymore. Everybody has access to a calculator pretty much all day long and everywhere in any role there are. And if you look at the generation today, they're not teaching themselves, they're not valuing memorizing. They are focusing on being resourceful. If I know how to operate a calculator perfectly, then that does most of my job. That is what I need to learn, and I don't need to memorize every formula. The second one being don't cheat. It is unethical. There would be bad impacts like failing the exam, possibly more severe consequences that follow. So if for, and cheating is always unethical. It will always be lack of integrity. But if we were to redefine this, because when I in my role as a student in the U.S. In colleges, most of my exams were open book, and you would be teamed up with a partner to take the exam, because that is what reflects the real world that's going to come in after you have graduated. Uh, in your normal jobs, nobody is expecting you to not use resources. When you are asked to come up with answers, nobody dictates how you get those answers. So at that point, it is more important for us to be resourceful with the people that we work with. So when we have timed exams, it will be multiple attempts, and it will be open book. But if you're taking an exam in 1 hour, and if you have a book that you can go through and look for answers with, you will only know that if you know where the content is in the book. Otherwise, you will lose time and you won't be able to pass anyways. So it's about being smart with our resources that we have, and that also lessens our load of memorizing everything. Also, with people in your office, when you work in any professional role, we do use each other as an asset to come up with solutions, to come up with answers. So the idea of working, not sharing your work while you are a student is also something that is not celebrated in developed countries. The third one being study hard. This is your age just to study and do nothing else. That has also a lot of psychology research will show you that adolescence age that students go through, that is their age to develop in a lot of ways, cognitively, emotionally, emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence. So to restrict them from all of those types of growth and only have growth in education as a credential, that is also not wise. Uh, in developed countries, you will see students at a very young age being, uh, and when I'm talking about young, I'm talking about kindergarten, first grade, that early. Everybody has to have one or two hobbies and one or two interests that they have to pursue throughout. Everybody has to be enrolled in some sort of sport, and everyone has to have uh, a group with shared interest, which the project continues every year as they graduate from one grade to another. Uh, there are things that students outside of the classroom learning that is happening, because the schools want students to learn the skills of how to operate efficiently in a society. So there's a lot of outside the classroom, outside the school things that are happening where students are being taken to. Uh, One of their entire courses would be just go walk around the neighborhood, walk in the local grocery store. Uh, they are given gauges to give marks, assign points to the society, the community that they live in, uh, depending on how the houses look, how the street signs look. If you're going to a grocery store, how does the parking lot look? And they assess all of these. And this is a project that happens in fourth or fifth grade. They assess all of these, and as a group, they write letters to their local representatives, which is then annually there is an event where every local representative, the senator and the Congress representative, will meet with the school bodies to go over those projects. So studying is being redefined every day, and that is that is something that needs to be considered. The other myth that we need to get over with is being able to sit down and study for extended period of time, whether it's 14 hours, 16 hours. There is no one task in life that you can do that you can enjoy doing after a certain amount of time. You could be very hungry and you could have your favorite meal, but if you were to asked to eat that meal for continuously for 10, 12 hours, you will lose taste. Your favorite TV show, if you're asked to watch that for 14, 16 hours, you will lose interest in that. So there is it's a very inefficient process, where if you are proud of being able to study all night long, not only are you not really gathering any intellect and not being able to learn things, you are also negatively affecting your mental health, your physical health, and your other aspects in life. And that is what holistic education is aimed at, to ensure growth in all buckets of life, not just one. The other one being homework, being a part of schoolwork. And there's so many variations of it. You get homework for daily homework, you get homework for your weekend. Even when we have vacations and holidays, you get specific long-term homework projects for that. Homework, a lot of educational research shows that homework is something that inhibits growth in students, because uh, school uh, is that school is that institution in their lives where they go and they do all of this work, whether you call it homework or schoolwork. Homework, when you're sending students back home with a lot of homework, it just shows that what you wanted to achieve within that school, within that institution, as a teacher, as a professor, as a school, you were not able to do it, which is why you need more time from the student's personal life. So if done properly and efficiently, there should never be a homework. I can use the example of the United States over here. Uh, Students don't even take their books or their bags back home. Everything is always stored inside the school, because that is the one place where they are supposed to learn. Everywhere else, as you walk out of the school, as you walk out of the classroom, the goal is that you start applying what you just learned today. These could be soft skills, these could be hard skills, but outside the school is where you apply what you learn. If you keep on doing work, whether in the school or at home, then you never get the time, your mind never gets the time to synthesize what you're learning, uh, process that information, and then make the best decisions for yourself. Uh, Many a times we will catch students staring outside of the window. Not all of those examples are distractions from the class. A lot of times students process information at their pace in their context. So that time needs to be given to students, so that whatever you're teaching at school or in colleges can make its way into the student's psyche. The last myth is extremely important. We talked about how compartmentalized education has been a theme for the Indian education system, and now that we are moving towards holistic education, we should be able to focus our ways to where we see what kind of skills are we learning from everything that we do all day long in our 24 hours and 365 days in the year. So when we ask students to just focus on studying and not uh, waste their time with any extracurricular activities, whether it's arts and crafts, video games, sports, uh, whether it's dating life, whether it's helping your parent in the kitchen, whether it's having hobbies and interests, all of these things, we think of these things as taking time away from studying, but all of these are building skills in you, curiosity skills, innovation skills, team building skills. Relationships teach us a lot about how to deal with people on a daily basis. And no matter what field you're in, this stands true for all the disciplines, that after a certain level in any kind of managerial position and higher, uh, relationships and how to manage people is the only skill that matters. So adolescence is an age where it's very easy to get these skills into students. So instead of hindering them from indulging in these extracurricular aspects, we should be encouraging them. All right, so now we move on from the myth, what needs to be broken now. The last part of the presentation is what needs to be adopted in order to indulge in holistic learning and development for students. So I wanted to share with you today a theoretical framework that was defined by a Brazilian educator and social activist Paulo Freire in the year 1970. Uh, he had published a book. He has published a lot of books, but the one that was published in 1970, it was called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It talks about how education, because that was the time when Brazil was going through a civil war crisis and the society was not the same. So this book was actually banned in Brazil. This book was distributed through a lot of illegal channels throughout the societies and communities in Brazil, so that people can learn and people can liberate themselves from the oppression that they've had for years. This book was also used for the same purpose in South Africa when South Africa was going through apartheid. And so it has been termed as ideological weaponry, which is a very strong adjective for a book. In this book, what Freire does, he critiques the banking concept of education. The banking concept of education works under the notion that teachers or professors or educators are the one who deposit knowledge into a student. This notion is very problematic because it takes into assumptions a lot of things. It maintains that teachers are the only one who have knowledge. It also maintains that the assumption that students are the one who do not have knowledge. They are like an empty bank account that needs to be filled in, and teachers are the one with all of the money, all of the wealth. And the action of depositing knowledge as well, it assumes that education is a one-way road where knowledge can only flow from the teacher into the student. And this is a model that has actually defined a lot of our education systems throughout the world. More specifically in the schooling system, kindergarten to 12th. When we come into higher education, we see a lot more changes. But this is something that still exists, the banking system of education. What is really needed as the change of perception that is needed is to see that it's the student and the teacher that comes together to co-create knowledge, and it is not knowledge is not flowing from one person into another person, but it's two different perceptions. One, the teacher who has a lot of knowledge, who has a lot of life experience, and then a student who is brimming with curiosity and innovation and different perceptions. It's when both of these come together that is when knowledge is created, instead of knowledge as an already existing entity that needs to be transferred. So just to give you a couple of examples, why this shared context between the teacher and student is needed, and why this needs to be tied into reality in order for the student to perceive and meet the student teacher on the same level, because there's a very big gap. Teachers and professors have years and years of educational experiences, and they have access to a lot of knowledge from around the world, whether it's through research papers, journals, research collaborations. You cannot expect your student who is just coming out of their family's house and moved into college. You cannot expect them to meet you at the same level. So, which is why the shared context is needed for it to make sense to them. In schools, memorization, we talked about how that has been one of the ill features of the education system. Just a simple statement like New Delhi is the capital of India. It's a statement that can be memorized and everyone will always remember it. Not a problem at all. But as a successful teacher or professor, are you able to transfer the context to the student of why New Delhi is the capital of India? Why has it been such a centerpiece in the Indian history, in the Indian context, and what is its current influence? What makes it the capital of India? not just that it's a fact that it's the capital of India. Similarly, 2 plus 2 is 4. Uh, Technically, that is correct. But then, if we look at the context, which is why context is very important, 2 plus 2 is 4 could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, could be a very perceptive thing when you indulge in context. If you have two houses, wonderful. That means two houses and two houses. Now you have four houses. You have four different assets. But if you had two credit cards and now you have two more, now there are four different lines of debt that you have. So that is a negative thing. Two kids, if you add two more kids to that, that is doubling responsibilities. Uh, Two gym sessions, if you add two more gym sessions to that, that means depending on your body, you are exerting more physical endurance. This could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Limits are important. So without the context being present with that statement, context is what decides whether this will be perceived positively or negatively. And that is what is needed to relay information into the students instead of just giving out factual statements. So while we work on this last part, just reiterates the whole notion of co-creating knowledge between students and teachers, and but remembering our positionalities and maybe even redefining our positionalities in the education field if needed, where teachers, instead of this power relationship where teachers get to deposit education in the student, if we look at students are who dictate, students are who we are here for. We are, as teachers, as professors, we are here to serve the students, and students should get to dictate how we teach and what we teach, in the sense that students' learning experiences, their preferences, their voices in their entire process should be considered as well, and then changes should be made based on that. Because those voices are very important, because every voice is different, and which is why we were critiquing earlier how standardized testing is not a very good thing, because students are different. How they learn, what they learn, how they perceive things are very different. There are various backgrounds that students come from. There are students who are paying so much money to get tuitions for different subjects, but then there are also students who are uh, who are earning money for their family by providing tuitions. So both of these students would come into the same classroom, but from very different backgrounds, from very different life experiences. There are students who are playing the motherly figure role for their younger siblings. And all of these actually make a difference in when we talk about actionable items, because somebody who is playing the role of a guardian to her one or two or three, however many siblings, will have lesser time to do homework and teamwork compared to someone who does not, who is probably the only child. It's not to say one is good or one is bad, but it just says that students come out of different frameworks. Right? So incorporating those students' perception and their realities will make the learning that is coming out from the teacher or the professor, that is what makes it holistic, when you start considering the student as a whole individual and not just one aspect of this. This is one last thing that I will leave you with, and this brings the end to our presentation as something to take away from this presentation, as something to think with. Think about when you're planning your next lesson, when you're planning your next conversation with your student. If there's one thing that I would like you to take away from this presentation today, it will be this. And at this point, let's open up the content session for questions and more engaging elements. Thank you.
For your detailed speech on the topic Enacting Holistic Approach India's National Education Policy 2024. Near about all aspects have been touched by the keynote speaker. Now I request all the participants and delegates, if you have any question or if you want to put your opinion, please come with it. I request participants if there is any question, any doubt, your opinion, your comment about the topic, please.
And I will go ahead and add my email address in the chat box in case anyone wants to have this conversation in the future. I will always be accessible through email.
I think Dr. Swanand Shukla wants to ask question. Please, sir.
Yes.
Hello, good evening, Dr. Bedkar, sir, principal, sir, and organizing team. Wonderful sessions we are going with, and really brainstorming sessions and really igniting our minds. And today also I joined little late because of my hospital, some schedule was extended. But yes, definitely what I heard about, yeah, it is a wonderful session, and I can go through YouTube also later on because I'm still driving my car. Okay, so thank you very much, and I congratulate the resource person to present such a wonderfully such a at this platform. So thanks once again, thank you. And really, the holistic approach is very much required, and NAP nowadays, is approaching means is focusing its attention on this any national educational policy, and we all professors and teachers and whole education system is now we are ready to accept it, and definitely there will be a great metamorphosis in educational system. Thank you, and you have really enlightened us with various other aspects also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shukla. I think there's another question in the chat box by Shagufta Khan. Is free reign leadership type will work in Indian education system? Uh, I think Indian education system, it's one of the most influential systems that we have in the world today. So to assume that a certain type of style will not work, I don't think that is fair. But also when we look at the Indian education system, that is a very broad term. You have uh, you have universities that are private, you have universities that are public, so very different perceptions when you distinguish between both of that. Then you also have universities who are very new universities and institutions who are building their frameworks based on the framework of developed countries, US, UK, and a lot of these other countries, and sticking away from what traditionally has been going on in India. Not to say that that is good or bad, but when the field expands, there will always be new notions coming into it. And I fully expect to receive some obstacles whenever you are implementing a new leadership style, because culture change in any part of the world, in any kind of system, culture change is always, it makes people uncomfortable. That is, again, doesn't go back to good or bad, because comfort is something that we get used to, and change always makes you uncomfortable. But through the discomfort, only change can be possible. And a lot of times, leadership change is something that happens. You can start implementing it on a very smaller scale, and then it grows from there, because examples do not die out. And leadership, again, is not about position, it's about positionality. So if you choose to implement free reign leadership in your role, that would at least start the process somewhere, and it would impact somewhere. It would influence someone else to carry that forward. But wonderful question. Thank you.
Sir, one more question. Myself, Dr. Shukla.
Yes.
Sir, we are going for standardization, but what about the uniformity of, percolation of all the
So uniformity is not a bad thing. In fact,
different,
it's a very necessary thing if you want to keep society in order and stay away from chaos. Uniformity is definitely needed. What also needs to be supplemented is, let's be inclusive of student populations who might not be best defined by that uniform scale. So if we have supplemental measures to be inclusive of those student populations, those voices, that is what builds a holistic approach, instead of just attacking the uniformity system. Because uniform standardized testing exists in the US as well, But then there are so many other supplemental items for students of all background, different races, different disabilities, non-traditional students who are coming back who as war veterans. So as long as you are inclusive of that, I don't think uniformity is a problem.
Good
Thank
evening. This is Meera here. Thank you for your
Hello.
insight. Is there, hello?
Yes, I
I would
can hear
like to
you.
ask a question. Yeah. So I wanted to know, as an educator, how can we equip ourselves with new skills to be able to cope up with the new scenario? Is there
Can you say
anything
that
in
last
particular
part
you would
again?
say?
What kind of skill?
In anything you would think we should upskill ourselves so that we can cope up with the new scenario, considering the NEP coming into play from the coming year? Is there anything
So
as a teacher I should know or I should do more so that I could be more sensitive towards the new changes which is required or the challenges as a teacher I will face? Anything from your side?
this is one wonderful question, because it's always good to talk about all of these topics, but then we should always have the actionable items. What can I actually implement?
Yes.
So I think that
Correct.
recently the Ministry of Education is doing a wonderful job when they are putting these things out. If you think about India a decade ago or 2 decades ago, the average public would not even have access to this kind of information or these
True.
talks that are happening on a higher level. So
True.
before I created this presentation, I went through the Department of Ministry of Education website, and in there they are putting the meeting minutes of all of the meetings that they're having, senior board level meetings, PDF files of all of that. So I think one of the best things that at least worked for me is to go through all of the modules that they have, because they have modules of all the conferences. So every session that happened in their most recent conference, they have a PDF version of that. And I think if you
Okay.
go through that, it tells you what the government is prioritizing, because those keywords are mentioned more and more and more again. And then what they have is they have different plans for 20 up to 2027, 2037, and then 2047. So then you can see what are the short-term programs and what are the long-term programs. And this will allow you to assess what are the values that the government, the country as a whole is valuing. And then you can start aligning your values to that as well. Luckily,
Yeah.
we live in a time right now where if you go online and look up something, cognitive
True.
development, you will be able to get a lot of information.
True.
A lot. So I think even with this is where leadership needs to come in to the play as well, and have professional development opportunities for faculty, whether it is
Yeah.
seminars, workshops, even certifications,
Correct.
because it's very important to meet the students where they are instead of demanding that they meet us where we are.
True.
So,
Thank you
and
so
it's
much.
going to be a time-taking process. It's not something that can be achieved in one semester, 1 year, but at least a culture change will start.
True that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody else, please? I think now there is not any question. Thank you, Dr. Swanand Shukla, sir. Thank you, Meera Surve, ma'am, for your questions. And thank you, sir, for elaborate answers by you. Now, after this question answer session, I would like to invite Honorable Principal Dr. Ambedkar, sir, for his closing remarks. Please, sir. Sir, are you listening me? I think there may be some problem from his side. So here I am here for the vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing committee, Sri Kumar Swami College, U.S.A. First of all, I would like to thank today's honorable chief guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Rishi Raj Sir from Prairie View A&M University, Texas, USA. You have holistic approach to education and near about all aspects have been made very clear. So, on behalf of the organizing committee, I thank you, sir, for your precious time and thoughts. Thank you. I also thank Honorable Principal Dr. M.M. Betkar, sir, for his efforts to exchange knowledge among the intellectual science students and teachers and knowledge seekers. So, thank you to Chairperson Dr. Betkar, sir. I also thank active participants and all the participants from all over the globe and from country India. And now I request participants, please do not forget to fill feedback link to have your certificate. And with the kind permission of Chairperson Honorable Principal Dr. M. Ambedkar sir, I declare here that today's conference is over. Thanks to all. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
सर सर आलात का सर आता